And joining us now again for a return trip to the CJN Daily is Kevin Donovan, investigative journalist at the Toronto Star and the lead reporter on the Sherman family murders. Welcome back. It's nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me on, Ellen.
It's nice to hear you again, too. Our listeners can't see you, but we can. Congratulations. We're speaking as the podcast that you've been working on is about to launch. The podcast is part of Suspicion Season 2. There are 8 episodes. Tell me a little bit about why do this podcast now after you've done a book and so many hundreds of articles.
I think that it's a good time to put the story out in perspective so that people can hear the voices of all the many hundreds of people that I've interviewed over the years, and to get a sense of where the case is now. It's been 5 years and a couple of months. There's no magic to any particular timing. It's not like I've heard that something is about to happen. In fact, I just checked in with the police this morning and there's no announcement coming. They're still toiling away on this epically long investigation. So it's just, the time felt right is all I can say. My instincts are that now's the time to do it.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things we could talk about that. First of all, true crime podcasts are huge, and the Toronto Star and others have covered this in many ways, but podcast series seem to be the thing now. So perhaps we can talk about what is in your series. Is this all new voices, or are you repurposing most of your stuff from what you already collected?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, doing a newspaper story and even a book does not necessarily allow you to have all. There's a lot of things that end up work better for sound than they do in a book. So it's certainly a lot of new information. I think that having the benefit of, while others have covered this case, I've pretty much lived it. Other podcasts are relying on our reporting, on my reporting, and certainly in all the information that I went to court to get unsealed. Other podcasts and journalists didn't go to court like I did, and the Toronto Star did. So I think what this podcast does is take you through the case in a different way, and I think probably a more compelling way, because hindsight is 20/20, and now I can look back on everything I've done and tell the story as it happened, but also push forward to some interesting not quite conclusions, but directions that I want the listeners to go in.
So how different is the conclusion in the podcast than from what you've already said in your book about the reasons why this may have happened?
Well, the book came out in 2019. This is 2023, and a lot of things have happened. I mean, I'm obviously just being careful not to give away. I want people to listen to it. That's been a big effort for the Toronto Star to put this out, so I'm being careful not to give things away. But I think there's more meat to the conclusions that I reach. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Okay,
and the timing you mentioned it's the right time. I mean, Barry Sherman would have been 81 at the end of February, February 25th. And yours was coming out. Was yours always going to come out now? Or did you hear about the Toronto Star and say, hey, I hear the CBC's doing one too, we better hurry ours up? Was there any timing changes because there's another competing one? I have to ask. I mean, about
it.
No,
that's a valid question. Well, first of all, the first season of Suspicion was called Death in a Small Town, and that came out a year and a bit ago. It takes quite a bit of time, as I've learned. I'm new to this world of podcasting. It takes a long time to put something together and to make it sound high quality. So this was always going to be the next one. And at one point I was thinking of coming out last fall, but had to do more research. And so this is just, this is when it's happening.
How do you explain that there's 2 major Canadian networks? I mean, there's been lots of other podcasts and video casts over the years of people analyzing, but how do you explain that 2 are coming out in February? It sounds like that's weird, but coincidental. What do you make of it?
I don't know. I mean, CBC, I think also was going to come out last year, and I think they delayed. I've known about the CBC attempt for about a year, because I will often get called from my sources who will say, CBC called up and they want to talk to us, and I'll say, well, it's obviously a free country, but I'm hoping that in ideal world that I have been talking to you for 5 years, and I'd like you to speak just to me, but also if you want to talk to the CBC, that's great. I think the CBC, I know from my legal sources that they've been trying to access or have accessed the documents that the Toronto Star got unsealed. I'm just I'll be intrigued to see if they take credit for doing the work. It'll be a little bit like the little red hen story, if your listeners know that, if they do.
Well, that'd be super annoying. I mean, as a journalist, I'd be upset if you worked and owned a story and then someone else is doing it in a major way with probably bigger budgets. That would be super annoying if that was me.
Yeah, but the thing is that nobody owns one story, and the Sherman case is an important one. Why I'm so focused on it is because I'm trying to find out who done it. I'm not interested in just popping out a bunch of theories. I'm trying to interview the people who helped me get to the truth. But I've spent a lot of time scrutinizing the efforts and sometimes the lack of effort of the Toronto police, the biggest police force in Canada. Our reporting has shown a lot of quite significant problems in how they do it. And just in one of the little things that I go into in the podcast is that the Toronto police have no system for correcting mistakes. They unlike a lot of big companies these days, they have a way to look at something and have best practices, and if they don't meet best practices, then they change the way things are done. The police don't do that, and so that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with this is point out their flaws and hope that the brass at Toronto Police make sure this doesn't happen again, because there were a lot of mistakes in it, and as a result of that, we're 5 years and a couple of months with no resolution to this case.
Okay, I want to talk to you a bit about something which, not being Jewish, as you are not, but having to access the Jewish community has been a challenge. And I know that because I guess we can share, our own previous communications over the years. You've helped us a lot, and I tried to help you get access for your research, and it was tough. You got some for the book. How much more difficult did you find your resources were reluctant in the Jewish community to talk to you for the podcast?
Well,
and why do you think that was? Yeah,
I think there's always reluctance. It's easier as a print journalist to get people to talk because it's easier for people to go on and off the record, as people often do. My approach is always to listen to people and to try and be educated. And I also practice something that I call relationship journalism, so that if somebody I know through some part of my work has a connection, then I'll spend time with that person in the hopes that that person can help me speak to the next person. And yeah, you were very helpful to us in a couple of respects. You can't push people to talk to you. You can just sort of open your notebook and say, listen, I want to hear your story. And I think one of I had two calling cards on this investigation. One was my original story that caused the police to change their diagnosis to make it a double murder, and that certainly helped a lot. And in fact, even Jonathan Sherman, the son, had told me that was a significant thing. The other thing is that when people opened my book, The Billionaire Murders, they realized that I was making every effort to portray the Shermans in a truthful fashion. You won't find, look, I grew to really quite like and respect Barry and Honey through my reporting. And I've spent a lot of time interviewing their friends. And I continually hear people say things about them that are unflattering. And I've heard those stories too. But at the end of the day, I think they were very good people and excellent people and very important to the fabric of Toronto and Canada. And I think that and their communication I have with their friends is really what keeps me going. It's awful what happened to them, really awful.
Right, but back to the question, how much difference did they behave to you, besides the fact they didn't want to go on camera or on tape for a podcast? Did you feel that there was some continued reluctance because of perhaps Lashon hara? I don't know if you know that Hebrew term, but it means like speaking ill of people, bad gossip, it's a sin, or that they were actually still afraid personally that they might be targeted too. Those two theories, right?
To answer your question, yes, and I'm not familiar with that term, but was delighted to learn it. Let them rest is something that people would say to me. It's been 5 years. Let them rest, and in my line of work, I don't do that. I want to keep going until I get the answers. Yeah, for sure, there was reluctance, and sometimes there's reluctance on part of some of the agencies that they supported, and I have no proof of this, but I wonder if they're concerned that if they speak about them, then the Sherman family will not provide as much funding as Barry and Honey historically did. So yeah, a lot of and then I think the other thing is that some of the people that spoke in the book and spoke quite glowingly of them, because they were the ones who chose to speak, they got a bit of backlash from friends at the golf club or at the ski hill, and they're the people that, the Shermans were private people, and a lot of their friends are private people too. So it was a tricky road to walk, but I'm pleased with what I ended up with.
Is there going to be a film? Because I know you were trying to work on a documentary. And
yeah, there is a documentary that is in the works. I'm not, although I'm involved in it, I'm not supposed to really talk about it, but there is one coming down the pipeline, and I think that there'll be an announcement on that in the near future. But yeah, there is, and really that's, podcasts get a lot of listeners, books get a lot of readers, but a documentary series is can be quite powerful, I think.
Back to the kids, you mentioned Jonathan. I know that your reporting has shown and that there's been rifts in the family, especially among the kids and with their aunt, Honey's sister. So what's been happening with that? How much cooperation have the kids been giving to you in this new podcast series?
There's certainly been some cooperation throughout. I have not had recent chats on the record with family members, but I've certainly had background chats with them. There's one of look, there is a rift. We saw this, I guess, a month and a bit ago, when the daughter, Alexandra, one of the three daughters, she had put out a statement, which I was given a heads up on, by the way, put out a statement saying that reaffirming the $10 million reward and hope that there can be closure, and released a couple of pictures of her parents. And then a few days later, Jonathan Sherman comes out with a statement, just to CBC actually, saying that he's going to add $25 million to it. Now that's just looking at that, that's yet another sign of the rift. What I would have liked to have seen would be the four children together, and all adults, at a press conference, as we saw just yesterday with another case from around the same time, where the family spoke out and appealed to the media for help. We're not seeing that with the Shermans. It is not it wasn't a happy home life for many years, and now the kids are not. They're not allied together, and Aunt Mary is still completely out in the cold and very, very upset. Actually, she says she has PTSD, both from the treatment of her by her kids, her nieces and nephew, and also simply just by what happened to her best friend, Honey.
We're going to end up in a minute. I just wanted to ask you, as far as the money, everybody wants to know, okay, has the money been paid out, or is it to the kids, or is it still stuck in the court system and the whole investigation?
The majority of Barry's holdings were in Apotex, and that deal hasn't quite closed yet. Apotex has been sold to a New York company, and when that deal closes, and I think it's probably about $3.5 billion, that will then be divided up four ways among the kids. The kids certainly have had some payouts in the hundreds of millions along the way, but Barry Sherman had a sort of a serpentine like collection of companies out there, and some are still owned. They would have to be liquidated, but I think the Sherman kids are doing well. And
Alexandra's got a nice music career going too now. So
she does, yeah. She's and she has a beautiful voice. We heard that for the first time at the funeral, and she's shared with me over the years a couple of her songs, and now I think she has an album out.
yeah.
But yeah, so the money is being paid out. The estate has been settled. The thing is, sometimes, Apotex is the major asset, and the money hasn't flowed in for that yet, but it will in due course.
Okay. We wish you congratulations, and we'll be listening. We'll put the link, of course, in the show notes.
Thanks very much for having me on, Ellen.